Hello and welcome to the shop. Frederik Jerre has become a good friend of mine over the years. He lives in Sweden and periodically he drops me a little care package in the mail with some native woods or some unique items that he sources locally. And one of my favorites is called Masur Birch. And Frederik sent me a nice large chunk of Masur Birch. And let me show you what this looks like. Is that gorgeous or what? So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to get a little piece of this cut off and we're going to turn it into a Wall Street pin. So I'm really excited about this. You're not going to believe how gorgeous this wood is when it's turned. Frederik, thank you so much for this blank. I appreciate it and I'm going to get a lot of pins out of this one. To make this cut a little safer, I decided to use my sled. I'm using a clamp here to hold the block of birch against the fence. You can kind of see from this angle the clamp is out of the way. It clears on both the front or the entry and the exit of the blade, and I just want to take a little section off of it. As soon as I started the cut, I realized, what are you doing? You've got the blade up too high. So I immediately lowered the blade and made several passes through the blade, increasing the height of the blade after each pass. Now, it still could not get the blade high enough to cut all the way through this piece of wood. There is still a tiny little chunk of wood that's attached, maybe somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch. So what I'll do is I'll remove this, take it over to my bandsaw, and then I can run it through and very easily remove this section of wood from the block. Here's a quick shot of the blank before I cut it, and you can see that I darn near made it all the way through. I should be able to finish this up without any issue. I'm back over at the table saw. Once again, I'm going to employ the sled and the clamp to hold everything securely and to keep my hands as far away from the blade as possible. This is not a very thick piece, probably right at or maybe a little less than an inch, so I think we can make it all in one cut. This should be a perfect blank to make the pin we want to make. The tube for this Wall Street pin is a 27/64 inch tube. It's already roughed up, so I don't have to worry about that. Let's take our blank, let's get it marked, and I'm going to leave just a little bit on either end, just in case we have any blowout. We shouldn't, but so I left a very small amount, but I'm going to take this over to the bandsaw and we're going to get it cut to size. I brought the blank over to my bandsaw and I happened to notice that I had marked it on this side. And if you notice the blank, how it's shaped, as I'm cutting, I'll be cutting air, and the blank could potentially pull down and get loose from my hand and cause a problem. So I transferred the mark to the other side, which puts the largest surface on the ground, makes the blank more stable. Just trying to be as safe as possible with this. With this blank being an odd shape and being that I cut it so small, trying to save as much of the wood as possible, I've got to be really careful about drilling straight down through the middle of it so that I don't blow out the side and waste the blank. Now what I've done is I can't really put this in at an angle because it's oddly shaped, so I clamped it from side to side and I took it to my table and I looked straight down and tried to make sure that this back side was perpendicular to the jaws of my clamp. So now we're just going to center the blade, and we're going to go really slow and see if we can make this work. I shouldn't have any issue with this 27/64" blade flexing, so I'm not worried about that. I just want to make sure I start as close to the center as possible. There's the top of the blank, and unfortunately I blew out at the bottom. I got a little too close to the bark, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, I'm going to mill up another piece, and I'll be back in a few minutes to drill that hole. I grabbed the remainder of that section that I had cut off, and I cut the middle section out, and the middle section was quite a bit thicker, so we should have absolutely no problem with this. I think I can probably even mount this one at a diagonal the way the vise was meant to handle a blank. Ooh. Might have heard me while I was cutting that. I probably will have that sped up a little bit, but at one point I was like, ooh, I jumped because I heard a cracking noise, but I didn't see any cracking on the blank, so I think it probably grabbed inside of the blank. I've got a nice entry hole, I've got a beautiful exit hole, both are perfectly centered, and I don't think we'll have any issue with this blank whatsoever. Well, I really hate it that we had an issue with that first blank in drilling out the side, but I wanted to leave that in the video to show you guys that that happens from time to time. It happens to everybody. The top part of that blank is still good, so I may be able to trim that off and use it in a shorter blank or with a shorter pin. We'll find something to do with that down the road. What I want to do now is test my tube, and that's perfect. So let's get a little bit of glue on it. Tap this just below the surface. Plenty of room on the opposite end. We're going to leave this blank to dry. Got this Masur Birch blank chucked up. This wood's absolutely gorgeous. It usually turns like a dream. The only issue that I have, or not really an issue, the only concern that I have with this one is the bark. It's not going to actually be a part of the pin, but I'm afraid that it may peel off, so I want to be careful, have a face shield on so I don't have to deal with getting hit in the face by, a chunk of that. Let's go ahead and get the lathe started up, and let's turn this into a pin. Just take a look at that blank. That's what I love about it. I mean, it's just so gorgeous. All right, we're ready to start sanding. I got in a hurry and I didn't turn the camera on for the sanding process. Let me zoom in a little bit on that. You can take a look at the pin. I did not flip this pin when I sanded it, and the reason why is it's a very tight grain, so I wasn't worried about, you know, the grain laying down. So I went ahead, sanded it on the same direction through 400, and it just feels as smooth as can be. I'm going to go ahead and swap out to my non-stick bushings. We'll clean this up and we'll get a little finish put on it. I've zoomed in as far as I can go so you can kind of get an idea what this pin's going to look like. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to let it dry just a little bit, and then we're going to come back and put a nice coat of CA on it. Ready for a little CA. I really expect this blank to pop. Take a look at that. Let me get a couple more coats on here. I'm going to shut the camera off and get about 3 more coats. I'll come back for a couple of coats of medium. 5 coats of thin CA. Blank looks beautiful. Let's go ahead and put a coat of medium on here. This medium is going to take a little longer to dry, so I'm just going to shut the camera off, let it spin. I'll come back after I've got 3 coats. I really don't anticipate needing any more than that because there is no grain and there are no divots in this wood. It should take a real nice couple of coats, and we'll be ready to micromesh and buff. So I'll be back in a few minutes. I've got my non-stick bushings back on. I've applied 3 coats of medium. The blank looks amazing. It's ready to be polished with micromesh. I've slowed the lathe down as slow as it will go, and we're just going to buff it. You'll notice I have put the turning bushings back on. I'm going to buff a little extra on the yellow pad. Normally I don't like to buff too hard, but I could feel the CA glue where it laid on top of the blank. It had a few little bumps in it, and I want to make sure that I level those out. As I dry the blank with my paper towel, I can run my thumb across the top of it, and that gives me a good feel for, you know, any imperfections that might be in the blank. I'll be able to sand those right out. It's amazing what the micro mesh does. I mean, it just polishes it right up. It almost looks like it's ready to go right into a pin kit. I'm going to swap out the mandrel for my buffing wheels, and we're going to buff this blank to a real nice shine. Let's put a little blue rouge on the first wheel, and we're going to be ready to buff this pin right up. I'm ready to assemble this blank into a pin. I'm going to be using a Wall Street 2. I just want to show you the blank. I mean, just look at that. This is why I love this wood. To assemble this pin, we're going to take the cap and we're going to press it into the back of the pin. Let's look for a good spot to place it. I'm thinking right there. Yeah, because there's not much it's going to hide. So let's go ahead and press the cap in right here. Bring it up and I'll show you the fit. Look at that. All right, now we've got our spring. We'll slide that onto the ink refill. The ink refill goes down into the nib. The transmission thread's on. I always like to check the action of the transmission before I install it in the pin. Looks like it's going to be great. We'll slide that into the pin. And that is incredible. Look at that right there. What a beautiful fit. That is one gorgeous pin. I'd really like to thank you for hanging out with me tonight, and I'd like to say a very special thank you to Frederik. Thank you so much for sending me this block of Masur Birch. You know how much I love it, and I absolutely, every time I make a pin out of it, it's just one of my favorites. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. I want you to have a great evening. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon. Good night, everybody.